Okay, so last time on Nancy Drew, we were introduced to all of our suspects, some possible motives, and definitely a mystery or two. This episode, we continue exactly where we left off, with that jump scare turning out to be absolutely nothing. So don't worry, everybody, Nancy's perfectly fine. Except, of course, now she's even a little bit more upset with her dad than she was already. Alright, this episode's gonna start a little bit different because we're starting with a sex scene, just like last time. Okay. I'm already becoming very immune to this. I kind of don't even care. But this time it is with George, so it's equal opportunity. It's not just Nancy getting all these scenes. It is George this time now. And Hudson is acting extremely suspicious. He's chatting on his phone. He doesn't want her to hear, and she ducks out on him. Okay, so Nancy's become a little bit more intrigued with the Lucy Sable mystery. However, there's kind of more pressing matters at the moment. For example, clearing her name. So we've got a little bit of Alibi and Ashes vibes going on with this, with Nancy being a suspect. But it's not quite as fun because now Ned, George, and Bess are all suspects as well. Nancy's kind of going through the list of suspects and saying who could be hiding which secrets, and apparently George has been with an older man before. Not just Mr. Hudson, but apparently those rumors that we heard about last episode, well, it turns out that George was with an older man in high school, and from the sounds of it, she got blamed for that, and that's not really her fault. And I'm sincerely hoping that the show is not going to actually make it out to be George's fault, because when you're in high school, you don't really know any better, and that's not really your fault if you do get with an older person. Like, I'm concerned of the implications that could be had here, and I'm really hoping that they don't end up putting the blame on George for being with this older man. And it is mentioned here that she's kept secret his identity this whole time, so I'm not gonna lie, I have a sneaking suspicion it could be somebody like Carson, for all I know. And if this does go the Riverdale route that I expect it to, it probably will be Carson. And that'll probably be a big old bombshell later on in the series.
It's a whole thing that's happening tonight. I'll tell you about it later.
I've noticed a little bit of a pattern with Nancy so far. She does like to tell us that she's going to tell us about stuff later. She did this in the first episode too, and okay, Nancy, as long as you actually do tell us later. Okay, so this is the first episode where we're actually getting our full first look at the actual opening title sequence, and I gotta say, the way that they've done the Nancy Drew logo is a little weird. It's kind of cool up until the actual part where it says Nancy Drew and then some of the letters erode away. But the one that gets it the most is the R. It's so bad that it ends up looking like it's saying Nancy DPU instead. And I don't know if this is intentional or not. It's possible that it's supposed to be a clue, maybe. And given the show's genre and everything, that'd be pretty cool. I'd be totally into that. But until I watch more episodes, I'm not really going to be able to make that judgment call. And as it stands for now, I can't really think of a real reason why the R would change more into a P. So yeah, for now, I'm just going to chalk it up to potentially being a clue. But if it happens again and it's the same letter next time, and it's done the exact same way, I'm thinking it's just the stylistic choice, but it kind of is a strange one just because it's so concentrated on that one letter. And I feel like it has to have some deeper meaning to it. Like, it has to. That would make a lot more sense to me. So Nancy's overheard that Mr. Hudson is gonna have the autopsy done on his wife by someone of his own choosing. He's having her body moved. And Nancy finds this very suspicious. And I do too, but it's almost a little too suspicious. After all, he is suspect number one. It would be pretty obvious if he did it. But I expect that the show is going to try and take a lot more twists and turns than that. So I'm not 100% sure if he's guilty. I know it's like kind of seeming like that right now, but I feel like it's a red herring. Nancy decides that she's going to call in a favor and have a toxicologist that she knows perform some tests on Mrs. Hudson's blood. In order to do that, though, she's going to have to break into the morgue, and this is where we kind of realize that Nancy is actually walking a very thin line. Is Nancy actually just a good guy who happens to know how to break into a lot of places? Or is she actually more made for criminal activity? It's a bit of an interesting dynamic, a little bit of gray area to work with in the character. And I think it's kind of interesting because I can't recall ever really seeing this explored thoroughly before. I think there's a great potential for Nancy to actually be considered a bad guy if she went too far into doing some of the things that she does. And obviously, a lot of the times, the reason why she is breaking into and stealing things is all for a good cause because she's trying to solve a mystery. She's trying to find the guilty party. But it also kind of makes you wonder, what if she wasn't so into just solving mysteries? What if she was just into stealing things and breaking into places just for the thrill of it? And I think that could be an interesting part of her character to dive into in further episodes as well. So Nancy thinks that she is just going to basically lockpick her way into this highly secure facility. And then she gets up there and she's like, oh, dang it, it's a keypad. Like, whoa, I didn't realize people use keypads now. It's a little odd considering that, like, yeah, most places have keypads, Nancy. I don't think that was really all that surprising, but okay. But it's requiring an ID card, and I mean, the guy who she just watched walk out of there was wearing one, so you kind of think she'd be like, I'm probably gonna need a key card to get in. I guess that throws her off, so she kind of has to recalculate her plans. And on her way back up, she sees a ghost. Well, like, here's the thing. Of course it's not a ghost. There are no ghosts in Nancy Drew. Right? Right? Like, to my knowledge, every supernatural sort of experience that Nancy has had in the books and in the games have all been explainable. They've all been the result of smoke and mirrors, some sort of gas leak, or whatever it was that was in Ghost of Thornton Hall, or just, the culprit with puppets or something, just there's only one game that I can think of where there have been a couple of unexplained instances, and that's Message in a Haunted Mansion, and specifically the PC game. That as you go throughout the mansion in that game, as you're going along, you're doing your tasks, there will be little events that happen in the background, and they're not fully explained at the end of the game. Like, you have a character named Abby, and she does a whole seance, and we actually had a seance in the last episode, and it did make me think of Message in a Haunted Mansion. And Abby does kind of say that, yeah, I've got a few things set up to make things seem a little bit spookier, but in the PC version, there are a couple others that aren't quite fully explained. But it's pretty easy to just chalk it up to Abby and her spooky ways. As far as the books go, every book I've ever read, I don't think there's ever been a stone that's been left unturned or a supernatural experience that hasn't been fully explained. So I can't really believe that there's any ghosts or anything going on in this show, just because in the Nancy Drew universe, there tend to never really be any actual ghosts or supernatural things. It's all explainable. However, it's possible that they're going to switch things up a little bit here. So it's kind of hard to say for sure. But for now, I'm just assuming there are no such things as ghosts. None of this is like actually ghosts or anything like that happening here. And the show does kind of make a point of it to say that maybe Nancy is just kind of losing her mind and going a little bit crazy. And I mean, yeah, that could be it. I don't know if I like that idea, partially because it's been done so often, and I kind of don't want to see that with Nancy Drew. I just want to see Nancy solve some mysteries. That's all I want, really. That's all I want out of this show. So I'm hoping that they're kind of not actually going to go with that, and it's just going to be like, oh, she's under a lot of stress or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, no, I'm just not a fan of the whole, oh, she's going crazy idea, and I don't believe that ghosts are going to exist in this universe. So I'm chalking it up to stress right now. All these hallucinations that Nancy has been having in these couple of episodes. That's what I'm going to put my theory on. So Nancy explains that getting inside the morgue might be a little bit harder than it looks, and she's going to need the help of everybody to break in, including George, who kind of doesn't really seem like she's a big fan of betraying Mr. Hudson. And Nancy's picking up on this immediately because George is not exactly subtle.
Oh, and steal his phone.
You steal his phone, I can break into it.
Noted.
Why can't you do it?
So Nancy stops by Ned's auto shop to pick up something to break into a car with, which you can kind of tell he's like, really? Is that all I'm good for now that you know that I've been behind bars? Like, okay. Meanwhile, George is trying to steal Mr. Hudson's phone, but she kind of fails at that because he comes out of nowhere and is like, hey! And she's like, hey! And she kind of chickens out of actually keeping his phone, although he probably was going to realize it was missing anyway, and it'd probably be better for her to keep her potential enemy closer. But Nancy does spy all this, and this is the second time that she's used binoculars in this episode, and I was gonna let it go the first time, just let it slide, but this second time I've realized that Nancy kind of just sucks at hiding, because the first time she was wearing the binoculars, it was like she was literally almost right there, it seemed like, or at least the editing kind of made it seem that way. And here, she's not even really hiding behind the tree that's right next to her. She's literally in the semi-bushes that aren't exactly obscuring her. And she's just like, with her binoculars. Like, come on, girl. Anyone could look up and see you. And I honestly, the first time I saw this, I honestly thought Mr. Hudson did see her at first. But somehow he didn't, so okay, I guess. So Mr. Hudson approaches Carson for some legal advice, I guess. And Carson makes mention that he promised his wife that he would never work for another Hudson again, which implies that Ned was innocent this whole time. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of had that feeling anyways, but it's kind of nice to have a little bit more theoretical evidence for that. So Nancy confronts George about helping Mr. Hudson, and they kind of go back to high school, and there's a lot of bad blood there, and it makes me wonder one thing. If George hates Nancy so much because of what she did, or rather didn't do, during high school, why is Nancy even employed at her diner? Why did George give her a job there if she doesn't like her? And if she's continued to not like her this whole time, why hasn't she fired Nancy? Nancy could literally work probably anywhere else. So why George? And this is a question that I kind of had in the back of my head the first episode, but I thought, maybe we'll address that. But I don't know. It almost feels like they might not even mention it here. And I don't know if we're actually going to get into that. I hope we do, because this is kind of a big thing. I would like to know what exactly did make George, of all people, hire Nancy. I mean, Nancy has solved all these mysteries as a kid. Surely there's somebody, if she's got this toxicologist friend who owes her a favor, surely there's somebody in town who could get her a job. Why is she working for George? I want to know this. I'm so curious. What is going on here? So Nancy tells us about this little tradition that they do every year, the bucket tradition, where they fill it with water, and midnight they dump the water out, and as long as it's still water, you're good, but if it turns to blood, then you're marked for death. Okay, that's ominous. Okay, so it's a little bit funny, and it's probably not really what's going on here, but when Nancy confronts George about the whole, yeah, you're actually helping him thing with Mr. Hudson, she kind of accuses Nancy of having super hearing and hearing everything that went on with them. And then in this scene, Ned's all like, whoa, who would even trust that guy? And Nancy's all like, you'd be surprised. And you just see George in the background, and it focuses in on her, and it makes it seem like she overheard Nancy. I'm not sure she actually did, but it kind of comes across that way, and it's just a little funny that she accuses Nancy of having super hearing, and then she has super hearing herself. And George is going over to Mr. Hudson to kind of warn him, presumably, about the plan. So she's clearly playing both sides. So Nancy just casually walks over and breaks into a car and steals a key card and hallucinates blood coming out from under the car. Nancy, I think you need to sleep, my dear. I think you need to get some rest. Nancy finally breaks into the morgue and generally does a pretty good job of escaping the sight of the cameras until she actually gets to the room that she needs to be in, and then she just leaves the door wide open. Come on, Nancy. You think they're not going to notice that on the cameras? Meanwhile, Bess and Ace are on the side of the road, and they are basically acting as lookouts to make sure that nobody gets to the morgue and finds out that Nancy's in there. So they've pulled a flat tire, and lucky for them, this cute lady named Elizabeth stops, and she's like, yeah, I guess I'll help you. I got a jack. And she ends up changing the tire herself, and she seems like she's probably gonna be a bit of a bigger character, considering she actually has a name. She introduced herself, so there has to be something more to her character. Is she someone who is related to Mr. Hudson? What's going on with that? I don't know. It almost seems a little suspicious. Meanwhile, Nancy finds Tiffany, and Tiffany looks a lot worse than we last saw her, understandably so. And Nancy gets some of that blood, and you would kind of think that they would have had like a tag or something that would have maybe identified which one was Tiffany, so that Nancy didn't have to actually like go through every single cart to find her. But then Nancy also gets a jump scare, and she's led a little further into the morgue. Meanwhile, trying to buy time, Ace does something with his car to make it start smoking, and Elizabeth is clearly very annoyed with Ace at this point, because this man clearly does not know how to maintain his car, at least as far as she knows. And it's kind of funny because when she's asking for help, she actually actively looks at Bess, who is literally just holding her little jacket that's probably like Prada or something over her head while it's raining. And she asks Bess for help to help her put stuff back in place. So Nancy finds the evidence from Lucy Sable's old case, all the DNA that was attached to her from that case, and she decides, what the heck, I'm gonna steal that too. And then one of the cameras catches her through the glass in the door, and it's like, really, you saw that? And that made the alarm go off, but not the open door that she left earlier when she first went into the room. Like, okay, if you say so. I don't think I fully understand how this works. Maybe it's like a heat signature sort of thing. So because Nancy set off the alarm, she's basically locked inside, and luckily for her, George comes and saves the day by smashing open the window with a crowbar and taking like all the evidence that Nancy just got. And can I just say really quick, like, I know they're kind of doing stupid stuff with George's character a little bit, like they're giving her some really dumb decisions, but also like I love her so much. She's so awesome. I love George. She's the best. but anyway, so Nancy gets arrested again. Meanwhile, Bess and Ace are like, hey, shouldn't Nancy be back by now? And they have this conversation, and at first it almost seems like they're really trying to push for Bess and Ace to get together, which I kind of had a feeling they were probably going to try and do anyway, because this whole last episode and the episode before that, it's all been, oh, he's trying to get with Bess, he's trying to get with Bess, he's trying to get with Bess, and I'm like, okay, eventually they're probably going to get together.
Ace, the thing is I don't really date anybody. Boys, girls.
Wait. Whoa. Whoa. Hang on a second here. Is Bess Ace? And I mean not like Ace the character, but like, is she asexual? She says she's not experienced attraction to anyone. Like, dude, that's so cool. That's so rad. Like, yo, okay, I'm cool with this. And Ace is apparently cool with it too. And you know what? I appreciate that. That's cool. That's really cool of Ace. I like that. So, you know, I wasn't expecting them to make Bess the not straight one, but alright, I will take it. I am okay with that. It's actually kind of interesting because like in the books and in the games, she's generally a very flirty person. And I haven't really seen her be super flirty here yet. And I'm not saying she couldn't be still, but it's just, I think that's very interesting because Bess has always kind of been the one that's been like, ooh, a cute boy, a cute boy. And here, apparently, it's not really anybody. And that's actually so cool. So, maybe this show isn't gonna be so bad after all. Nancy is at the police station, and this is where the Alibi and Ashes vibes are going off the charts. And Nancy realizes that while she's there and they're taking down her information, she could get a little bit more information herself. So with some quick thinking, she finds out the last number that Mrs. Hudson texted, and she writes it down on her shirt, which is actually kind of clever. And she is visited by her dad, who is not exactly thrilled with these turn of events. Basically, Carson just kind of says, yeah, Ned had no idea that Tiffany Hudson testified against him a long time ago, and he wasn't, like, that worried about Nancy actually being with Ned, just that he wanted her to kind of focus on her own life instead of getting attached to some boy, and he's very quick to say that the dress that Nancy found in the attic is just a little prank that he played on her mother. And he's very good at saying what was actually in the trunk that Nancy saw him and her mom dig up years ago. It all seems very convincing. But he is a lawyer. And he knows his daughter better than anyone. So he's probably thought of the answer to these sorts of questions a long time ago. Because, let's be honest here, if my kid was Nancy Drew, I would probably expect them to go snooping through my attic at some point in the future and have a couple questions along the way. Oh, and then there is the bombshell that Carson is going to be working for Mr. Hudson now, and basically being his lawyer now, and yeah, I can see that being a little bit of a snag later on in the season. So Nancy's finally free. She goes, she picks up the evidence from George, and George is basically like, you know what, it's occurred to me that Mr. Hudson doesn't actually really ever want to be with me, because if he did, he wouldn't be afraid to be around me. And on the one hand, yeah, that's kind of obvious. On the other hand, if you're thinking about it, it has only been like, what, a couple days, maybe a week since his wife died, so if you are thinking about it, it probably would look a little distasteful for him to just be with some other woman that soon after his wife's death. Like, yeah, that's obviously going to kind of make him look guilty. So I can kind of understand that from his side, but it's also kind of obvious that George can do better. And, I mean, she even says it herself.
You know, all this time, I thought it was Tiffany. But it's not. It's me. I'm the kind of girl that you keep a secret.
You deserve a lot better.
I know that, okay?
Okay.
I'm aware.
Although she says this one line,
But sometimes my actions don't line up with my awareness.
and it's like, is that... It's one of those lines that it's a little strange, because it's like, would a real person actually say this? Or is this the writer of the script talking and saying this as a reason to let the characters do whatever they want? Because I think if you saw that in just like a random script by a no-name person, basically, you would see that and you'd be like, this is kind of a weird line, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for an actual person, an actual character to say this. I'm not sure if that's George talking or if that's the writers talking. So we finally get a good look at the blue roadster, and it's perfect! Ah, I love it. It's so cute. And there's even like a little holder in there for Nancy's mother's necklace that Ned put in there, and it's really cute, really sweet, and I like it. I'm so glad they put the blue roadster in there. The best thing. And we go into our little mini montage at the end of what everybody's up to, and apparently Bess is actually interested in this Elizabeth girl, and okay, I'm not sure if they're gonna go for asexuality now after all, or if they are gonna say that Bess is just gay in general. I mean, in any case, the fact that they're making her gay in some way or another is really awesome. It's really cool. But it's possible that they can mishandle it, and I'm hoping that they won't. So I'm waiting to see what it is exactly that they're planning to do with Bess and Elizabeth. And I'm gonna be honest with you, okay? When I was first watching this, I was completely oblivious that there was even anything going on between those two. Like, I for sure thought that they were setting it up for Bess and Ace to end up together. Like, I actually legitimately thought that that was what they were gonna do. All the way up until Bess was telling him that she wasn't interested in anybody. And I was just now, like, rewatching to make sure I had everything down, and I was rewatching the car scene where Elizabeth is like taking Bess's hand and is like, okay, and you just hold it there. And I'm like, you know, I'm starting to maybe see the subtext here a little bit. Maybe just a smidge. And so yeah. Not gonna lie, I did not catch that at all the first time around. Second time after I actually knew that they were gonna be a thing now, presumably. Now I kind of see the little hints, the little signs, I guess. And at the end of it all, they're all going out to check their buckets, and George's is the one that is filled with red paint, because that's what it looked like, a lot more than blood, but it's the principle of the thing. So, rip George, you will be missed. Which is a shame because you were my friggin' favorite character out of all of them. And of course she's going to be the first one to die. And Nancy also gets the bright idea to not just text, but to call the number that Mrs. Hudson last texted in the middle of her little lovemaking session with Ned. Like, really? You think now is the best time for this? You don't know how long this will take you, Nancy. Like, why? What if somebody had... What if it... So, it does end up being Ned. But, like, if it hadn't been Ned, if it had been somebody else and they'd actually answered it and you started talking to them, like, what were you gonna do when Ned came back? Just hang up on him? Were you gonna, like, tell Ned? Well, this is such terrible timing, Nancy. I can't believe you. But yeah, like I said, the number is Ned, supposedly. And it's possible it's not even his phone. He probably just literally, like, found it lying on the road somewhere, for all we know. Or it probably is his phone, but they're probably going to make it seem like maybe it's not his phone, but then it actually is. Or something like that. They're kind of trying a little bit to put this on him, to pin this on Ned. And I kind of have this feeling that, like, the police department, Chief McGinnis and all of them, I think that they're gonna maybe end up pinning it on Ned, even though he's innocent. And then it's gonna be trying to find a way to prove his innocence. It's going to become less about proving Mr. Hudson is guilty and more about proving that Ned was not the one who did it. That's what I'm expecting from this show anyway. Okay, so final thoughts. This episode was fine. It gave us a little bit more characterization into everybody, and I'm intrigued by this addition of Elizabeth. I'm curious to see what we do with her. And I gotta say, this show is actually kind of reminding me a little bit of How to Get Away with Murder, which I haven't watched in a while. But I like How to Get Away with Murder. I like it a lot. I think it's a really good and clever show. And I think that this show kind of wants to be like that show. I think they want this Nancy Drew series to be like How to Get Away with Murder. And I don't know if it's quite up to that level. I feel like all of the twists and turns so far, they haven't been too surprising or anything. I think they've all been pretty kind of safe so far, really. Like, I'm still enjoying myself with this show, but it doesn't really feel like it's anything particularly different than I would expect them to do. It is only the second episode, so I'm, again, kind of holding off. I'm waiting to see how this goes. I feel like with every TV show, you kind of want to give it a couple episodes, especially when it's just starting, for the crew and the writers and everybody to kind of find their footing and figure out what it is that they want to do with the show and how they're going to go about it. And there have definitely been some shows where the first couple episodes I was not a fan of, and later episodes I ended up being like, you know what? I really love this show. Nancy Drew, the CW Nancy Drew, still has a lot of potential, I think, and I think there's still a lot of interesting ideas that they can do with this show. And I am curious to see what other ideas are going to come forward through this show. So, I'll see you guys again on episode 3.